underwater. A submersible tourist vessel disappears after a trip thousands of feet below the surface to see the Titanic. A search and rescue mission is now underway. All the incredible details up ahead. Plus,
were you afraid in that moment?
Of course. They had threatened to hang me. Of course I was afraid.
in tonight's Prime Focus, we take you to Arkansas, where a member of the Little Rock Nine is with us as she helps commemorate the very courtroom that cemented the desegregated school system we currently have into a national monument. And
Pac was one of those rappers who really just soundtracked what life was like at the time.
His music was very vulnerable, but without actually having to say the words about mental health.
on this Juneteenth, we celebrate the holiday by marking 50 years of the contributions and history of hip-hop, from its impact on social justice to mental health. And good evening, everyone. I'm Kana Whitworth in for Lindsay Davis tonight, and thank you so much for streaming with us. And we're following those stories and much more tonight, including the ongoing investigation into the mysterious white powdery substance being sent to over 100 officials in Kansas, plus marking Juneteenth, 158 years after the emancipation. We bring you these celebrations and those looking to see history for themselves by the numbers. And Hollywood star Michael Shannon joins me to talk about his latest role in The Flash and a whole lot more. Our correspondents are fanned out across the world, covering those stories and more for us tonight. But we, of course, begin with the race against time to find a missing deep-sea submersible that was set to be exploring the wreckage of the Titanic. An hour and 45 minutes after the dive began on Sunday, all contact was lost with the 5 people on board. The submersible is called the Titan, and it's from Ocean Gate Expeditions. It's a state-of-the-art vessel developed with the help of NASA. It's deployed from a larger ship that then remains on the surface as the smaller craft dives below. Ocean Gate invited a handful of paying tourists to travel with research scientists to see the Titanic. Ocean Gate had recently shared the highest resolution images ever of that doomed ship. And tonight, the U.S. Coast Guard has joined the search. Teams are looking in a remote area some 900 miles off the coast of Massachusetts. The Coast Guard says that the 5 on board have enough oxygen to survive for 96 hours. But tonight, time is running out. James Longman leads us off.
Tonight, a race against time in the desperate search for a missing submersible carrying 5 crew members touring the wreckage of the Titanic. The US and Canadian Coast Guards scouring an area over 900 miles off the coast of Massachusetts, deploying radars and sonars capable of searching above and below the water.
We're working very closely at this point to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to locate the submersible and rescue those on board.
The ship left Newfoundland, Canada on Friday, carrying a submersible operated by Ocean Gate Expeditions. That vessel started its voyage down to the Titanic Sunday morning. Officials say an hour and 45 minutes into that dive, the ship lost contact with the sub and alerted the Coast Guard. Ocean Gate says a crew of 5 has enough oxygen to survive for 96 hours.
There could have been an accident. It could have become entangled in the wreckage of Titanic. It could indeed have had a catastrophic failure. The answer is we don't know just yet.
Target 12 degrees.
An epic voyage to the world's most famous shipwreck. This is a rare opportunity for you to explore Titanic as an actual member of the expedition crew.
Since 2021, Ocean Gate Expeditions has offered tourists paying roughly $250,000 a chance to travel with scientists studying the doomed ocean liner 2 miles down at the bottom of the ocean. That tour aboard a submersible called Titan. It's the only one in the world able to carry 5 people to Titanic depths.
We are taking scans of the wreck.
The sub itself doesn't have a GPS, but it's guided to the wreckage site by the ship above via text message. The round trip is at least 8 hours long. The sub is supposed to rise to the surface if there are any problems.
There is a mechanism whereby you can release weight and this thing can float to the surface. So I'm just hoping that that works.
Tonight, ABC News is learning that among the missing passengers, British billionaire Hamish Harding. His company confirming he was on board. He posted on Facebook hours before the dive. A weather window has just opened up and we're going to attempt to dive tomorrow. More expedition updates to follow if the weather holds.
A seemingly ominous message now as James Longman is joining us. So, James, what more do we know about who was on board and how is the Coast Guard looking for them?
Well, Kana, there is one pilot or commander on board and what they're calling 4 mission specialists. They include those paying passengers. And the U.S. Coast Guard is saying they're using sonar buoys to listen for any sound in the water. It's certainly a race against time. Kana?
It sure is, James. Our thanks to you. And joining us now for more is National Geographic editor Kristen Romey. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Kristen. And look, we know the best case scenario here for this team below the surface is that they have, what, roughly 2 days worth of oxygen left. So how challenging is it going to be for search and rescuers to find this vessel in this limited window of time they have?
It certainly is going to be a challenge. I mean, we have Canadian, U.S. Coast Guard, Canadian Navy, all sorts of amphibious assets out there looking for this submersible. But the fact is, you're looking for something the size of a minivan in the bottom of the North Atlantic. So it's hard to say, but they certainly have a challenge ahead of them.
Yeah, challenging is almost an understatement at this point. And this is a state-of-the-art submersible, as you know so well. But so much can go wrong when you're 12,000 feet below the surface. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. You know, many explorers will tell you that it's more difficult to explore the deep ocean than it is space nowadays. I mean, where the Titanic is, you know, roughly 12,000, 13,000 feet under the sea, you are looking at pressure that's 400 times what it is on the surface of the Earth. So everything's just trying to crush whatever is down there to begin with. And that's nothing to say about all the hazards at the bottom, you know, and we don't know how close it got to the wreck or where it left from the platform. So it is kind of, it is an incredible challenge, I think, to be able to identify it at this point. But as you noted, there is a possibility that if this hull is intact, that they can release the ballast and come up to the surface. This submarine is a titanium and carbon fiber submarine. It's a very new technology. And what it also has is a real-time hull monitoring system. So if that hull was in any way compromised as they began their descent to the bottom of the Atlantic, the pilot should have had enough time and warning to drop the ballast and resurface. And maybe that's the case.
Perhaps. Let's play this out here. Say it's just stuck without communications. Do we have the capability to get to it in time?
It depends what other assets are out there. What other submersibles do we have that could get down there and identify it? But you don't even need necessarily a manned submersible. It's something that's going to locate it and be able to retrieve it from the bottom of the seafloor.
You mentioned one safeguard. Are there any other safeguards in place with this ship that is on the top of the water, you know, communicating with this vessel?
Right. I mean, this is not like, you know, space or cell phones.
Right.
GPS does not work from the bottom of the ocean. So this is really going to be more of a sonar search looking for signals that may indicate where this may be on the bottom of the seafloor.
And you have interviewed the CEO of OceanGate yourself. Can you talk about this company's mission?
Sure. I spoke to CEO Stockton Rush back in 2016 for National Geographic, just when he was building the Titan. And he was incredibly excited about the technology. It is revolutionary. And also the design of this submersible lends itself to this new era of extreme tourism. It has a much larger window that enables paying guests to view the remarkable scene around them, as well as large video screens, massive lights and cameras. So it's definitely a different experience than previous, you know, dives to the Titanic that have been on smaller steel submersibles with fewer people on board.
Wow, well, so many families, including his, holding out hope tonight. National Geographic editor Kristen Romey, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, if you want to learn more about the Titanic and the wreckage, you can also always visit natgeo.com, but we will be staying on top of that story for you tonight. Also tonight, more than 100 threatening letters to lawmakers and officials in Kansas containing a mysterious white powder have been found. Federal law enforcement sources tell ABC News they were also sent to former President Trump and Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, but they were intercepted by postal inspectors. Here's senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky.
At first, envelopes containing a suspicious powdery substance were discovered in the mailboxes of a few dozen Kansas lawmakers. But tonight, the list of intended recipients is growing. More than 100 Kansas officials have now received letters, and federal law enforcement sources tell ABC News letters were also addressed to former President Trump, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and other high-profile individuals, though we're told the postal inspectors intercepted those letters before they were delivered. It appears most of the letters were sent to Kansas Republicans, including Attorney General Chris Kobach and State Representative Tori Marie Blue, who told us she threw hers into a flower pot. She shared this photo of hazmat teams responding.
It was just in your typical letter envelope, and at the very bottom of it, you could feel that it was very thick.
At least one letter included a message saying it is important not to choke on your ambition, but one lawmaker described the note as cryptic and lacking sense. Kansas Republicans called the letters a cowardly attempt to intimidate the legislature and asked lawmakers to remain vigilant and cautious while opening their mail. State Senator Stephen Owens noticed a fake return address of a local church on the letter he received.
It was quite terrifying, right? I mean, this is the stuff that you ultimately see in movies, hardly real life stuff.
And Aaron Katursky is joining us now. Aaron, do we have any lab results on this powder yet?
We do. A number of the powdery substances were sent to a lab for testing, Kana, and they came back negative for any concerning biological agent, according to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Still, these letters have made the last few days for the recipients really stressful. Kana?
Certainly have. Aaron Katursky, our thanks to you. And new developments tonight in the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump. A federal judge today approved a protective order sought by special counsel Jack Smith to keep Trump from disclosing sensitive information obtained during the discovery process. In seeking the order, the special counsel notably said that the material includes, quote, information pertaining to ongoing investigations. The protective order also applies to the former president's co-defendant and longtime aide, Walt Nauta. And it was high-stakes diplomacy in Beijing, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken shaking hands and sitting down with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two superpowers trying to ease tensions, but up until about an hour before the meeting, it was unclear whether the face-to-face meeting would even happen. ABC's Matt Rivers is in Beijing.
With tight smiles and a short handshake, a crucial moment tonight in superpower diplomacy. Secretary of State Antony Blinken face-to-face with China's President Xi Jinping in Beijing. Xi calling it, quote, very good. Both sides made progress.
It's in the interest of the United States, in the interest of China, and in the interest of the world.
The 35-minute meeting was never a sure thing. Confirmed just an hour before it began, the will they or won't they suspense a reflection of how tenuous the U.S.-China relationship has become. Blinken had planned to visit in February. That trip postponed when a Chinese spy balloon crossed into U.S. airspace and President Biden ordered it shot down. The relationship just getting worse from there as Xi strengthens his bond with Russia's Vladimir Putin, and a series of flashpoints erupt in the South China Sea around Taiwan. A Chinese destroyer coming within 150 yards of a U.S. warship in international waters. A Chinese fighter jet streaking near a U.S. military plane, a move the Pentagon called dangerous and unnecessary. Direct military-to-military communication remains largely closed off between the countries.
I think that's an issue that we have to keep working on. It is very important that we restore those channels.
Blinken's 36 hours on the ground here, a whirlwind of talks. Key topics, Taiwan, fentanyl, and lethal aid to Russia in its war against Ukraine, something China said it will not provide. Progress, yes, but limited at best.
The meetings that we had, I thought, were very candid, very in-depth, and in places constructive. And in other places, we have a lot more work to do.
Thank you. And let's now get right to Matt Rivers, who's in Beijing. Look, Matt, relations with China have been deteriorating for years. The stakes for this visit could not have been higher.
That's exactly right, Kana. President Biden saying that Secretary Blinken did, quote, a hell of a job here in Beijing, perhaps laying the groundwork for a Biden-Xi meeting later this year. But these two countries remain at odds. No one single issue more contentious than Taiwan. China remains angry at the U.S. for its increased support for the island. The U.S. likely not changing that posture anytime soon, which means the relationship between these two countries will remain contentious. Kana?
All right, Matt, our thanks to you. There was a rash of extreme gun violence across the country this weekend. Hundreds of people were shot, more than 20 in a single incident outside Chicago, leading the U.S. to more mass shootings than days of the year so far. ABC's Alex Perez has the story.
Tonight, communities mourning after a rash of deadly gun violence across the nation. Just outside Chicago at a Juneteenth celebration, police say more than 20 people were shot in a strip mall parking lot late Saturday night.
400 people outside, female screaming, report of gunshots.
One killed, others injured fleeing the gunfire.
We just started her to shoot before we had us, so we dropped down.
Police say an unknown number of suspects fired multiple weapons into the crowd. Those suspects is still at large. The White House responding today.
It's devastating. It's tragic. This type of gun violence needs to stop.
Across Chicago, police say at least 10 people killed, 60 more injured in shootings. And in the small town of Kellogg, Idaho, police finding 4 people shot dead inside a residence, one suspect taken into custody. In Washington state, authorities say at least 2 people killed and another 3 injured after a gunman opened fire near a music festival Saturday night. The sheriff's department says the shooter fired randomly into the crowd. A suspect also injured, now in custody.
And Alex Perez is joining us now. Alex, look, Chicago, we know it's not the only city that experienced a mass shooting over the weekend.
Yeah, Kana, just some staggering figures. Officers also responded to mass shootings in San Francisco, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. According to the Gun Violence Archive, at least 132 people were killed this holiday weekend. Kana?
Oh, Alex, our thanks to you. Also tonight, we are closely watching a tropical threat as dangerous storms continue to slam the South, and with them, a slew of tornadoes. We have one in Mississippi right here. It trapped 8 people inside a bank, causing widespread damage. Chief meteorologist Ginger Z is tracking it all.
Tonight, a tornado ripping across southeastern Mississippi. In the town of Moss Point, 8 people were trapped inside M&M Bank. All were rescued safely. There's widespread damage, though, to homes and businesses, and the cleanup is just now underway. Nearby, in Mobile, Alabama, the National Weather Service issuing a flash flood emergency after more than a foot of rain fell across parts of the Gulf Coast. Life-threatening flash flooding still happening tonight, a product of persistent storms for days. All of this after a weekend of wild weather, 20 reported tornadoes across 8 states, including this tornado in Jasper County, Mississippi, killing 1 and injuring nearly 24 people less than 24 hours ago.
And let's get right to Ginger Z. Ginger, can you time out these storms for us?
Yes, we still have a couple hours left of them. Kana, I want to take you through what's going to happen here. Destin, Pensacola, Florida, and then Mobile still in that flood watch, but a severe thunderstorm watch, mostly for damaging winds back on the tail end of that front. So San Angelo included in central Texas there. So it's not just Georgia and Florida, but all the way through the Gulf Coast that tomorrow, again, have this persistent front that has not moved much. It is also aided by this extremely active subtropical jet stream. By tomorrow afternoon, Lafayette to New Orleans, please have 2 ways of getting warnings. That thing looks ugly as it sinks south. Then we've got to talk about the heat. Excessive heat warnings have been on for day 7, 8, 9, depending on your location in Texas. But all the way over through Alexandria, look at New Orleans, will feel like 109, but the feels like for Dallas and Austin at 117 tomorrow afternoon. This is not going to break for much of Texas until end of the week. And when I say break, dropping to feeling like 105 versus 117. So it's not a huge improvement. We also have Tropical Storm Brett that has now formed. So this is the earliest this far east in Atlantic Basin history. Where it's going? Toward the Eastern Caribbean for this weekend. It looks like it stays at that Cat 1, high-end tropical storm for most of the time, but this can change, and so please do, especially if you have interest there, pay close attention for what happens after Puerto Rico through the weekend. And I should say that this thing formed, Kana, out in the Atlantic so far east, record, right, placement, because the water temperatures out there are 4 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit above average. We have not seen numbers like this around the world. We're seeing sea surface temperatures never recorded before.
Wow, that's a concerning thought. I know you've been watching that closely for us, Ginger. Thanks to you. And now to the West Bank, one of the fiercest days of fighting in years, with Palestinian militants detonating roadside bombs and Israeli forces opening fire from the sky. The Israeli military said that they came under attack during an arrest raid at a refugee camp in the city of Jenin, with explosives disabling several Israeli vehicles and helicopters dispatched to assist in that evacuation. At least 5 Palestinians were reportedly killed, including a 15-year-old boy, with more than 90 others injured. At least 7 Israeli soldiers were also reportedly hurt. And powerful new images of a bitter battle in the war in Ukraine. It shows trench warfare and close combat as Ukraine wages its counteroffensive. The country claims to have retaken an 8th village, but the fighting is also taking a heavy toll. ABC's chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell is in Ukraine tonight.
Tonight, Ukrainian troops say they've driven Russian troops back in their counter-offensive, claiming an 8th village. This video, filmed in Petykhatki in the south and posted on the Ukrainian Armed Forces official Telegram channel, claims to show troops liberating the village after days of reported heavy fighting. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces releasing this dramatic and graphic video, claiming to show fighting in Russian-occupied trenches towards the Zaporizhia direction last week. The soldier sweeps through the dugout in what they say was a surprise attack, methodically hunting down and killing enemy troops as the Russians appear caught off guard and unable to respond. Special forces telling ABC News they killed 10 Russians, although they've released only part of the video which shows 3 deaths. But the Russians putting up a stiff resistance elsewhere, and the Ukrainian advance has so far been slow. Today, the Ukrainians acknowledging the Russian troops have reinforced and are launching offensive operations in the east and northeast of the country.
And our thanks to Ian Pannell for that. And in Russia, a new trial is also underway involving Alexei Navalny and accusations of extremism. The Russian opposition leader, who has been jailed since January of 2021, addressed the court before the judge closed the proceedings. Navalny's allies also posted a statement on social media denouncing that decision as a sign of President Putin's fear and calling for a new campaign against Russia's war in Ukraine. If convicted, Navalny could face several decades behind bars. And Americans across the country are marking today's Juneteenth holiday. That includes in the nation's capital, where thousands lined up at the National Archives for a rare opportunity to see the actual Emancipation Proclamation and General Order No. 3, which informed enslaved Black Americans in Texas that they were finally free in 1865. We will have much more on the significance and the celebrations throughout this broadcast, including a closer look by the numbers. And we have a lot more to get to here tonight on Prime. Coming up, a Good Samaritan races to action to pull people from the water after a houseboat capsizes. Also, actor Michael Shannon talks about returning to the DC universe and The Flash and bringing authenticity to his role as a country music icon in George and Tammy. But next in our Prime Focus, it's an often overlooked part of the story of school integration. And now the people who became the face of the movement as teens are shining a light on the man whose decision made it all possible.
What do you think would have happened if he had not issued that order?
Then there would have been many years of delay before desegregation attempts would start again.
Whenever news breaks,
the crush of families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
In Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is. We're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
With so
so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. But a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
And welcome back. Nearly 70 years since the Supreme Court ordered an end to racial segregation in America's schools. Tonight, we have an exclusive look at the new monument in Little Rock, Arkansas, to an often overlooked part of this story. It was there that 9 black teenagers led a fight for integration. And now they are shining a spotlight on the little-known federal judge who played a critical role. Our Devin Dwyer has the story.
We believe that the evidence will show beyond a reasonable doubt that
the trial is fake.
The defense will call 3 witnesses who
part of the National Mock Trial Championship.
Objection, Your Honor. This calls for hearsay.
But the lessons for students and the country in this historic Little Rock courtroom are very real.
If you think about our city prior to 1957, totally segregated, that system of oppression was in full force, and then the courts intervened, and that turned the tide.
It was 3 years after the Supreme Court had ordered an end to racial segregation in schools, and Little Rock Central High was still not integrated.
How does it feel every time you come back here?
It's easier every time.
Elizabeth Eckford, who was 15 at the time, joined 8 other black students, the Little Rock 9, as volunteers to brave those schoolhouse steps.
I was elated that we could go to school.
And then you made that attempt, but it wasn't that easy.
Well, the attempt was, no, it wasn't easy.
What's the story of this picture?
There's a group of people following me and taunting me and spouting hatred.
How did you keep such a stoic look? You look
I had on
determined.
Sunglasses because I have a sensitivity to sunlight.
Were you afraid in that moment?
Of course. They had threatened to hang me. Of course I was afraid.
After being turned away, Eckford turned to a little-known federal judge named Ronald Davies, a transplant from North Dakota, filling in at the local federal courthouse. Her lawyer from the NAACP, future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. After making their case and despite a campaign of intimidation, Judge Davies wasted little time, ordering the state's segregationist governor to comply with the law.
There was no way that the governor of any state was going to interfere with the pronouncement of the Supreme Court of the United States. That was very simple. Basically, it really was. If he had been able to frighten me down there, do you know what would have happened in every other southern state? Raise a little ruckus and delay integration.
Judge Davies was a brave man, I think.
Art Phillips produced a documentary on Davies' life.
He did get all kinds of letters, hate mail, death threats, things like that. These were kids. And all they wanted to do was go to school. And so, with him upholding the law and their determination is just a beautiful part of our civil rights history.
Nearly 70 years later, Judge Davies is being celebrated as an unsung hero. His modest courtroom has been newly restored to what it would have looked like in his time, opened exclusively to ABC News cameras.
This is your first time back. And what a job they've done, huh?
Yeah. It doesn't look so foreboding as I would have imagined it.
It was here that Elizabeth Eckford and members of the Little Rock 9 testified to the world.
I remember being frightened all the time. I do. I'm just somebody who kept coming back to school, even if I was just a hollow person inside. Because the most that I could do was just keep coming.
And it's here where Judge Davies stood up for the rule of law.
What do you think would have happened if he had not issued that order?
Then there would have been many years of delay before desegregation attempts would start again.
And now through those same courthouse doors walk hundreds of high school students from across the country.
I hope it feels like 1957 to you.
Chief Judge D.P. Marshall telling them he hopes the space will be a tribute to equal justice for all.
And the reason y'all are making history is this is the first proceeding of any kind that we have had here. My court's vision of this is that it will be a living memorial to the rule of law.
What is the rule of law?
Basically, it's whenever the citizens and the government have the law equally applied to them, so the government can't get away with shady things.
What do you take away from this?
Learning about the importance of the judicial system and the historical context of that as well.
A pivotal legacy from Little Rock now getting the spotlight, as Eckford says she hopes its lessons aren't lost.
Every voice in the community is important. Each of us is responsible for the kind of community we have. There's a lot of people who were silent think that that was virtuous, but being silent is a decision that allows bullies to do what they do.
And certainly a shared responsibility. Our thanks to Devin Dwyer for that. We have a lot more to get to here tonight. Coming up, the latest on the search for a man accused of slashing several women all within the span of an hour, and marking 50 years of the contributions and history of hip-hop, from its impact on social justice to mental health.
None of us thought about these kind of things. These kind of things were shunned because I don't even think we knew how to cry back then.
We grew up in the era where they said you had to be hardcore.
Yeah.
But next, it's Juneteenth. We take a deeper look at what this holiday means to millions of African Americans by the numbers.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital. Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
From America's #1 news comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and customizable to your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
I came out of jail with a plan. I was gonna put every piece of energy I had into music.
Give it up for Jelly Roll!
If I wasn't a musician, I'd be dead. This was my best bet to really have an impact.
I'll cry with you.
Who'd have thought I could help people? I needed help, I still need help.
Somebody save me. I love you.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. But a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi!
This mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day. I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby. It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
When I got sent to Idaho to cover the murders of 4 college students, it was a story that didn't make any sense. 4 students stabbed to death in their beds while 2 roommates were home.
You gotta think to yourself, okay, who's the target and how many people would a man go through to get to his target?
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is The King Road Killings, a new podcast from ABC Audio. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
This is where the newsmakers come first in the morning to be heard. America's #1 morning show.
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000. Yeah. Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
Wherever the story, ABC's Good Morning America is right there.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey, I'm David Muir. Wherever the story, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
And welcome back. Today marks the observation of Juneteenth, which became a federal holiday 2 years ago. And an increasing number of states are starting to recognize it as a public holiday. Let's take a closer look at the numbers. 28 states have now enacted laws to make Juneteenth a paid state holiday, up from just 18 last year. And by some estimates, roughly 39% of employees in the private sector will get the day off, up from just 9% in 2021. Juneteenth marks an important day in American history. It was in January of 1863 that President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which legally freed all slaves in the U.S. during the Civil War. But it wasn't for another 901 days, nearly 2.5 years later, on June 19, 1865, that a Union general arrived in Galveston, Texas, to announce slavery had ended. At that time, more than 250,000 black people were still enslaved in Texas and did not know that by the law they should have already been free. As news hadn't made it to Texas yet, which was the westernmost state that allowed slavery in the United States. Texans began celebrating Juneteenth a year later in 1866 and continued to do so informally for more than a century until 1980, when it was made an official state holiday. Juneteenth is the first new federal holiday in 4 decades since Martin Luther King Jr. Day was recognized as a federal holiday in 1983. Well, we have a lot more to get to here on Prime. A horrifying moment on stage, what someone threw at a singer, Bebe Rexha, during a concert. And from The Flash to George and Tammy, acclaimed actor Michael Shannon tells us about his latest projects.
What does it take to be America's #1 news? It takes asking the straightforward, tough questions.
Do you believe that Donald Trump should ever be president again?
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000. Yeah. Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
The news-making interviews.
You said that there were 6 friends. One of them was sick.
Yeah.
Do you have future political aspirations?
Going to the front line.
The search for survivors. How does this war end?
And getting to the heart of the story.
Thank you for being here. We'll be here for the long run.
ABC News, #1 in the morning, the #1 newscast, #1 in daytime talk, Friday nights, Sunday mornings versus the competition, and the #1 streaming news. Thank you for making ABC News America's trusted, straightforward first choice.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
on the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital, destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
When I got sent to Idaho to cover the murders of 4 college students, it was a story that didn't make any sense. 4 students stabbed to death in their beds while 2 roommates were home.
You gotta think to yourself, okay, who's the target and how many people would a man go through to get to his target?
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is The King Road Killings, a new podcast from ABC Audio. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Get ready, America, every Friday.
The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff.
Yes!
And save big time, too.
The right stuff.
Fridays on GMA. You're going to love it.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis, streaming weeknights.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
And welcome back. The race to save people after a houseboat capsizes during a storm, and the search for a suspect in multiple subway slashings. And a concert ends with a singer being taken to the hospital. These stories and more in tonight's rundown.
You want to get your people off?
Dramatic video from Florida shows Good Samaritans performing a rescue at a houseboat. The houseboat was capsizing during rough weather in Panama City. Video appears to show one person jumping onto the sinking houseboat to help get those on board out. Another video shows a boat navigating choppy seas near the houseboat and approaching people and what appear to be a variety of objects from the houseboat scattered around the water. Everyone made it safely back to shore. 3 women were injured in a series of slashings in New York City, with police still looking for a suspect. All the slashings happened Sunday afternoon. Police said a suspect slashed 2 women in the legs at the 86th Street Lexington Avenue station before fleeing on a train. Minutes later, police said another incident was reported when a woman on a train was slashed in her left leg. All 3 women were hospitalized for their injuries. The NYPD released surveillance images of the suspect they're looking for.
Police in San Francisco say several people were wounded when gunmen in separate cars fired at each other along the city's popular waterfront in a targeted incident.
Officials say 6 people were injured in the car-to-car shooting near the Embarcadero, 2 of them by gunfire, 3 others injured by flying glass. Police say it appears to be an isolated incident.
Newly released footage shows a fishing trawler before it sank in the Mediterranean Sea with hundreds of migrants on board. The footage from the European Border and Coast Guard Agency was taken June 13th, hours before the boat capsized off the Greek coast and sank on June 14th. The AP reports that estimates have placed more than 700 people on board the boat, with officials still searching for survivors and hundreds still missing and feared dead.
Public health officials expressing worry about Meta's decision to roll back its COVID-19 misinformation measures. Experts have told ABC News they fear the rollbacks will cause more false information to spread about the virus and its treatments and vaccines. Meta said Friday its decision came after consulting with its independent oversight advisory board and after the World Health Organization downgraded the global health public emergency. The company said the measures would remain in countries that still had a public health emergency declaration, which no longer includes the U.S.
Singer Bebe Rexha experiencing an on-stage scare when she was hit by a cell phone thrown from the crowd. Rexha was playing a sold-out show in New York City last night and was making her way down the stage when the phone hit her in the face. Rexha fell to her knees and was helped by crew members before being escorted off the stage. The concertgoer who threw the phone was charged with assault. On Monday, Rexa shared 2 photos on Instagram of injuries around her eye with the caption, "I'm good."
All right, everybody, he is a 2-time Academy Award nominee. Many, though, consider him the most versatile talent of his generation. And you might recognize him from some of his hit films like Knives Out, Shape of Water, and Man of Steel. Michael Shannon is joining us in studio today. I'm so happy to have you here. And you have a lot to talk about, many projects, but including your role in The Flash. So should we let everybody take a look at it real quick?
Sure.
All right, let's do it.
Bruce, I could fix things. You could also destroy everything.
This can't be happening. I completely broke the universe.
Zod, we've been waiting for you.
I created a world with no metahumans. And now there's no one to defend us.
The audience has been extremely anxious to see you reprise this role in The Flash, even though it came as a bit of a surprise to you, right, to be asked to do it?
Yeah, I was pretty confused because, as I recollect, I die at the end of Man of Steel. Superman breaks my neck. So when I got the call, I thought, But they said, well, it's a multiverse. So I said, I guess all the bets are off. Then you can do whatever you want. So,
did that sum it up for you? What do you hope moviegoers get out of this performance of yours?
Oh dear, I don't know. I mean, I'm really just there to provide some sort of obstacle. It seems like for the Flash to deal with. But I sure love Ezra's performance in the movie, and I think it's a pretty relevant story about, you know, how you've got to accept the past and not try and change it, and just deal with it and move on. Yeah.
I'm really excited about this. You star in this series, George and Tammy. It's getting a lot of Emmys buzz right now. So talk to us about playing the iconic country star George Jones. And look, I know it's not new to you to portray an icon like Elvis, right? What was different about diving into George Jones?
Well, Lord, I didn't really know much about George Jones before I started the project, so I had a lot of work to do. But fortunately, he wrote an autobiography, so I was able to start there. That's always a good tip. And then I read Tammy's book and Georgette's book, and I watched every interview he ever did and a bunch of performances.
And alongside Jessica Chastain, who plays Tammy Wynette in this, you know, she's singing, you're singing, especially in the live performances. Why do that, you know, instead of dub it in later?
Well, I think a lot of the story of these two people is contained in their vocal performances together. I think that's when they really have this. It's interesting phenomenon because they're on stage in front of a bunch of people. Ostensibly, it's a very public thing, but I think there's something very private happening between the two of them when they're singing. And I feel like if we were just lip syncing, you know, even though we're not the singers that George and Tammy were, if we were just lip syncing, there would be something missing from the performance, I feel like. For example, when I sing He Stopped Loving Her Today.
My favorite song.
Oh,
that's
it's, I mean, what can you say about it? But if I was just lip syncing that in that scene, I don't think it would have had the same power or urgency that it has in the show, even though there's no way in heck I could ever sing it like George, but I did my best, yeah.
Well, an incredible job. And I know you talk about the relationship that George and Tammy had, but the relationship that you and Jessica have, you've referred to each other as kindred spirits before, and that really comes across on screen.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you get lucky in this business. You just meet people that you just vibe with, like, instantaneously, you know. The first project we did together, Take Shelter, we had to play husband and wife, and we basically met each other a couple of days before we started shooting, and it's kind of mysterious how that can either work or not. But I just feel like, I don't know, she feels like a sister to me or something. I just feel like we know each other so well.
As if you weren't busy enough.
Yeah.
You are getting ready for your directorial debut here. We're talking about, we just had it with Eric LaRue. It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival earlier this month.
Yeah.
I mean, you are incredibly versatile. And so now for you to take on directing as well, what is that like?
I really enjoyed it. I was surprised, actually. I was very nervous going into it. I thought maybe I was going to be in over my head, but I was just surrounded by the most hardworking people, and it's very moving how much everybody wants to help, you know, and if you just listen to them and let them do their thing, you really don't have to do all that much, which is was kind of an interesting discovery. So maybe, yeah, now that I know it's so easy, maybe I'll just start doing that instead.
Thank you so much for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
It was awesome to have you, and we'll get those you know, bar doors installed.
All right.
Next time around.
Yeah, next time.
Michael Shannon is here with us tonight, and you can stream every episode of George and Tammy on Showtime, and The Flash is out on theaters right now. Well, 50 years ago, hip-hop was born during a party in the rec room of an apartment building in the Bronx. And since then, it has become one of the most successful music genres, captivating listeners around the world. Tonight, Soul of a Nation presents a look at how far hip-hop has come from social justice and financial contributions to mental health. Here's a preview.
The story of hip-hop is just the storytelling of culture and of community. For so long, culture and community didn't talk about mental health.
People was afraid to talk about that back then.
None of us thought about these kind of things. These kind of things were shunned because,
taboo.
Yeah, you know, like, I don't even think we knew how to cry back then.
No, you couldn't cry.
Still learn.
Couldn't
We
cry.
grew up in the era where they said you had to be hardcore.
Yeah.
All the time.
That was a genre.
It's beautiful that we're at a point in the culture where you can have those conversations. Probably if I went around the room, that's probably why we all fell in love initially with hip-hop and the music, is because it gave voice. It gave voice to people who were dealing with trauma, broke, starving. Grandmaster Flash.
Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head.
The message really did talk about mental health, but not in a direct way. It was really a song about unlivable conditions.
At night I can't sleep, I toss and turn. Candlesticks in the dark, visions of bodies being burned. Four walls just staring at her. I'm paranoid, sleeping with my finger on the trigger.
Ghetto Boys.
Ghetto Boys mind playing tricks on me. Like, there's so many records that you hear now. You're like, oh, he was dealing with anxiety. He was dealing with depression, PTSD.
What we saw artists within that era of hip-hop is having to use these metaphors to really address systems of PTSD, depression. These are words that we have now.
I feel like for a lot of us, the hip-hop artists we were listening to were essentially like our shrinks.
Yeah.
They were our therapists.
Can you remember
like,
the first thing you heard that made you feel like that?
Tupac, keep your head up.
Keep your head up. I mean, he's a preacher in the hood, a preacher for positivity.
Pac was one of those rappers who really just soundtracked what life was like at the time.
His music was very vulnerable without actually having to say the words about mental health.
When Biggie released Suicidal Thoughts, it was a very powerful omen of what was to come with some other artists opening up and being honest.
Notorious B.I.G. made a song that really kind of talked about what a lot of people were feeling, even if they might have been afraid to say it out loud.
The stress is building up, I can't believe suicide's on my mind. I wanna leave.
And a lot of ears were listening and perked up to the possibility of being honest about the internal trauma that they endured.
And I know that if I show up, really take care of my mental and emotional health, then I can really, 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 really fulfill the destiny that I think God has for me on this planet.
You've done an amazing job at making it okay and normal, to letting people know that it's okay to talk about your mental health. Where does that come from? When did it start? What was the thing?
Oh man, for me it was more like a kind of like a cry for help, in a sense, because you know I've been dealing with anxiety and bouts of depression my whole life. You know, I just didn't know what it was. I didn't have the language for it back then. And I remember just driving down I-26 in South Carolina, feeling like
Like, I was really about to have, like, that heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember going to the doctor, and the doctor told me, you're healthy. But he was the first doctor that ever said to me, yo, do you deal with anxiety? And I was like, anxiety? What's that? He was like, what you describing sounded like a panic attack.
You didn't even know the word.
I didn't know what it was.
Like, and that's why I love how, like, you went and made a book. Everything you said about mental health, you didn't only just speak about it, but you went and acted on it.
I mean, I don't know, Joey, you come at a different time.
I feel like, you know, my first conscious encounter with the concept and subject of mental health was when I was 17 years old and I had lost my best friend to suicide. After that, I had went into a long period of depression. You know, I feel like there was a lot of pressure on me as a young black man to produce through my pain, to like take care of everybody, you know what I'm saying?
How did you manage that?
Through many different ways, different coping mechanisms.
Rhymed his ass off.
Right, exactly.
I run away from my problems knowing I need some help. With these drugs, with my mental health.
I distracted myself with work, you know what I'm saying? And in the moments that I did get that quiet time, my demons was attacking me.
You fast forward to Koi, right? And to Koi's generation. I feel like your generation is way more willing to say, I have depression. I'm depressed.
Yeah.
I have anxiety.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
Is that a comfortable thing for you to do?
It is a comfortable thing. I think mental health is everywhere. As a celebrity, as being in the limelight, we just got to kind of, you know, just bring awareness into it.
But I still got anxiety, that's why I keep it on me. Sometimes I feel like I can't trust no one around me, 'cause I got anxiety.
I love that we're having this conversation because it's reality. I couldn't talk about this 10 years ago.
That's what I was going to ask you.
I
Because
couldn't.
of the evolution of you even,
Yeah.
right? The evolution of who you are now. And I think that is a representation of where the culture has come.
Because I lost a daughter. How I make it happen and get through it, I got to get out and do something for somebody else too. That's doing something for myself.
It hits different when, you know, I rest in peace to your daughter. Like, it hits different on that level.
I've lost a daughter to suicide.
Damn, sorry to hear that, brother.
I'm sorry, baby. You made a conscious decision to be vulnerable, to talk about losing your daughter. Why did you, and how was it received?
Well, I knew I was unhealthy, and I knew that emotionally, somehow I was detached from, you know, my history of what I've been through outside, what I've seen, what I've done, made me somewhat detached, and then I gravitated to the cowboy ego and pride, and my ego and pride was actually running my life. Most of us are a product of our environment until we learn how to be a product for our environment. And I said, I'd rather be a product for my environment than a product of my environment.
When Jay-Z is speaking to the New York Times, admitting that he went to therapy. This is remarkable that we can talk about this, that we can admit it.
Our culture in general, you know what I'm saying? There's less outlets for us to get help and receive help. Now I do therapy and I love it.
Rappers are becoming more comfortable with taking the same level of authenticity and applying it to their real lives and also using their public platforms to talk about it. I have so much hope that that's going to continue and that they're going to continue not only making music that addresses it, but talking about it in the very large platforms that they have.
Well, you can see that full conversation on mental health, as well as discussions on hip-hop's influence on social justice, economics, and the role of women in its success. Hip-Hop at 50, Rhythms, Rhymes, and Reflections airs at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 Central on ABC, and it streams on Hulu starting tomorrow. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Kana Whitworth. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, this Juneteenth, one congresswoman is pushing to change the language of the Constitution. The amendment, she says, includes a slavery loophole. And the rising death toll in India, more than 150 people dead during a heat wave, what is now making the emergency response difficult.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis, streaming weeknights.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
This is where the newsmakers come first in the morning to be heard. America's #1 morning show.
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000. Yeah. Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
Wherever the story, ABC's Good Morning America is right there.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital, destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5. Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi!
Is this mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show. Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day.
I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby.
It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
When I got sent to Idaho to cover the murders of 4 college students, it was a story that didn't make any sense. 4 students stabbed to death in their beds while 2 roommates were home.
You gotta think to yourself, okay, who's the target and how many people would a man go through to get to his target?
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is the King Road Killings, a new podcast from ABC Audio. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Reporting from Monterey Park, California, I'm Robin Roberts. Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
And good evening, everyone. This is ABC News Live Prime. I'm Kana Whitworth in for Lindsay Davis tonight, and thank you so much for streaming with us. We have a lot of news to get to this evening, including the race against time as a desperate search for a missing tourism vessel near the site of the Titanic vanished with several people on board. Plus, the powder scare mystery playing out across the country with over 100 officials having received the suspicious substance in the mail. We have the latest on that investigation. And on this Juneteenth, we look at the celebrations taking place across the country and discuss the steps some lawmakers hope to take to make abolishing slavery enshrined into law. But we begin with the race against time to find a missing deep-sea submersible that was set to be exploring wreckage of the Titanic. Well, an hour and 45 minutes after the dive began on Sunday, all contact was lost with the 5 people on board. The submersible is called the Titan. It's from Ocean Gate Expeditions, and it's a state-of-the-art vessel developed with the help of NASA. It's deployed from a larger ship that remains on the surface as the smaller craft dives below. And tonight, the U.S. Coast Guard has joined the search. Teams are looking in a remote area some 900 miles off the coast of Massachusetts. The Coast Guard says that the 5 on board have enough oxygen to survive for 96 hours. But tonight, they're running out of time. James Longman leads us off.
Tonight, a race against time in the desperate search for a missing submersible carrying 5 crew members touring the wreckage of the Titanic. The US and Canadian Coast Guards scouring an area over 900 miles off the coast of Massachusetts, deploying radars and sonars capable of searching above and below the water.
We're working very closely at this point to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to locate the submersible and rescue those on board.
The ship left Newfoundland, Canada on Friday, carrying a submersible operated by Ocean Gate Expeditions. That vessel started its voyage down to the Titanic Sunday morning. Officials say an hour and 45 minutes into that dive, the ship lost contact with the sub and alerted the Coast Guard. Ocean Gate says a crew of 5 has enough oxygen to survive for 96 hours.
There could have been an accident. It could have become entangled in the wreckage of Titanic. It could indeed have had a catastrophic failure. The answer is we don't know just yet.
Target 12 degrees.
An epic voyage to the world's most famous shipwreck. This is a rare opportunity for you to explore Titanic as an actual member of the expedition crew.
Since 2021, Ocean Gate Expeditions has offered tourists paying roughly $250,000 a chance to travel with scientists studying the doomed ocean liner 2 miles down at the bottom of the ocean. That tour aboard a submersible called Titan. It's the only one in the world able to carry 5 people to Titanic depths.
We are taking scans of the wreck.
The sub itself doesn't have a GPS, but it's guided to the wreckage site by the ship above via text message. The round trip is at least 8 hours long. The sub is supposed to rise to the surface if there are any problems.
There is a mechanism whereby you can release weight and this thing can float to the surface. So I'm just hoping that that works.
Tonight, ABC News is learning that among the missing passengers, British billionaire Hamish Harding. His company confirming he was on board. He posted on Facebook hours before the dive. A weather window has just opened up and we're going to attempt to dive tomorrow. More expedition updates to follow if the weather holds.
And our thanks to James Longman for that reporting tonight. Also, more than 100 threatening letters to lawmakers and officials in Kansas containing a mysterious white powder have been found. Federal law enforcement sources tell ABC News that they were also sent to former President Donald Trump and Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, but they were intercepted by postal inspectors. Here's senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky.
At first, envelopes containing a suspicious powdery substance were discovered in the mailboxes of a few dozen Kansas lawmakers. But tonight, the list of intended recipients is growing. More than 100 Kansas officials have now received letters, and federal law enforcement sources tell ABC News letters were also addressed to former President Trump, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and other high-profile individuals, though we're told the postal inspectors intercepted those letters before they were delivered. It appears most of the letters were sent to Kansas Republicans, including Attorney General Chris Kobach and State Representative Tori Marie Blue, who told us she threw hers into a flower pot. She shared this photo of hazmat teams responding.
It was just in your typical letter envelope, and at the very bottom of it, you could feel that it was very thick.
At least one letter included a message saying it is important not to choke on your ambition, but one lawmaker described the note as cryptic and lacking sense. Kansas Republicans called the letters a cowardly attempt to intimidate the legislature and asked lawmakers to remain vigilant and cautious while opening their mail. State Senator Stephen Owens noticed a fake return address of a local church on the letter he received.
It was quite terrifying, right? I mean, this is the stuff that you ultimately see in movies, hardly real life stuff.
And our thanks to Aaron Katursky for that reporting tonight. Also, Secretary of State Antony Blinken became the nation's first top diplomat to visit Beijing in 5 years, meeting face-to-face with Chinese President Xi Jinping at a moment when tensions between the two superpowers are high. So, was it a success? ABC's Matt Rivers is in Beijing tonight.
With tight smiles and a short handshake, a crucial moment tonight in superpower diplomacy. Secretary of State Antony Blinken face-to-face with China's President Xi Jinping in Beijing. Xi calling it, quote, very good. Both sides made progress.
It's in the interest of the United States, in the interest of China, and in the interest of the world.
The 35-minute meeting was never a sure thing. Confirmed just an hour before it began, the will they or won't they suspense a reflection of how tenuous the U.S.-China relationship has become. Blinken had planned to visit in February. That trip postponed when a Chinese spy balloon crossed into U.S. airspace and President Biden ordered it shot down. The relationship just getting worse from there as Xi strengthens his bond with Russia's Vladimir Putin, and a series of flashpoints erupt in the South China Sea around Taiwan. A Chinese destroyer coming within 150 yards of a U.S. warship in international waters. A Chinese fighter jet streaking near a U.S. military plane, a move the Pentagon called dangerous and unnecessary. Direct military-to-military communication remains largely closed off between the countries.
I think that's an issue that we have to keep working on. It is very important that we restore those channels.
Blinken's 36 hours on the ground here, a whirlwind of talks. Key topics: Taiwan, fentanyl, and lethal aid to Russia in its war against Ukraine, something China said it will not provide. Progress, yes, but limited at best.
The meetings that we had, I thought, were very candid, very in-depth, and in places constructive. And in other places, we have a lot more work to do.
And our thanks to Matt Rivers for that reporting tonight. Celebrations of freedom on this Juneteenth holiday. It marks the moment nearly 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that a Union general arrived in Galveston, Texas. And it was then that he informed slaves that they were free. Our Lindsay Davis takes a look at how this day is being commemorated across the country.
Tonight, from California to Kentucky, Michigan to New York, communities coming together on this national holiday, marking and honoring Juneteenth, the end of slavery in the U.S. In Johnstown, Pennsylvania, young volunteers helping to repaint an End Racism Now mural on Main Street. Celebrations in many towns, including Galveston, Texas, the birthplace of Juneteenth, where Union troops arrived to tell the enslaved they were free, 2.5 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. In Washington, D.C. today, thousands lining up outside the National Archives to see the Emancipation Proclamation, including husband and wife Derek and Renee O'Neill.
I'm so proud of the fact that it has taken place and that we're here.
And the fact that the whole country is embracing it, not just African Americans, but it's Black history, is American history.
It's American history.
And this truly, brings it home, that fact.
No doubt about it.
So.
In Fort Worth, Texas, for years now, 96-year-old Opal Lee has led a 2.5-mile walk, representing those long 2.5 years. Tonight, that retired teacher and activist, who many call the grandmother of Juneteenth for her work in making it a national holiday, says, let us keep fighting and march in unity. And from Santa Barbara, California to Detroit, Michigan, Black-owned businesses gathering together saying they are grateful to their communities.
We can't do anything alone, and so to have everybody come together to really celebrate Black people in the city of Detroit is a great thing.
Well, back in Washington, D.C., the Robinson family celebrating Juneteenth together, saying they're hopeful.
I think we're progressing forward every day. People from all walks of life here in this line, all colors. So I think that's powerful and impactful.
And our thanks to Lindsay Davis for that. And now I'd like to bring in Congresswoman Nikema Williams, a Democrat representing Georgia's 5th District. Welcome, Congresswoman, and thank you so much for joining us on this Juneteenth.
Thank you, and happy Juneteenth, Kana.
Of course. And look, before we get into some of the specifics of the Abolition Amendment, could you reflect on today's federal holiday, Juneteenth, an important moment that we recognize as a nation?
I mean, a very important moment. I was just looking at one of the things that is good about social media is you get memories from the years in the past. And I served in the state Senate before I was in Congress, and I saw where I filed legislation in Georgia to make Juneteenth a state holiday to replace our Confederate Memorial Holiday. And I couldn't even get a hearing for my bill. And now here we are, 3 short years later, and it's a federal holiday. So this is a day that we should all celebrate the progress of Black Americans, formerly enslaved people in this country, and one step closer to recognizing the full history of our country and the struggles that formerly enslaved people went through, including my ancestors. And so today is a day of celebration, but still so much more work to be done.
And commemoration, of course. And you've teamed up with New Jersey Senator Cory Booker and Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley to try to change the language of the Constitution, specifically removing what has been called the slavery loophole from the 13th Amendment. What exactly is the language you want to change there?
That's exactly right. So as we're commemorating Juneteenth, when every enslaved person learned that they were actually free in this country after slavery had already been abolished. One thing that most Americans probably don't even know is that we still have an exception clause in the U.S. Constitution in the 13th Amendment that allows slavery for punishment for a crime. So the 13th Amendment states that slavery is abolished except for punishment for a crime. And so Senator Cory Booker and Senator Jeff Merkley and I are working to change the U.S. Constitution once and for all. This is bicameral legislation. It is bipartisan legislation. And we're going to keep doing the work to make sure that once and for all, we remove slavery from our U.S. Constitution.
And we know the U.S. incarcerates more of its population than any other country, and that includes a disproportionate number of Black Americans. Practically speaking, how would this amendment help address mass incarceration?
So right now we have nearly 2 million incarcerated people in this country who are subject to forced labor, to slavery, and it is legalized based on our U.S. Constitution. We saw 7 states who have already ratified their state constitutions to get rid of this, including states that don't have a lot in common if you're looking at it from a political sense, like Alabama and Colorado, Nebraska and Oregon, Tennessee, Utah, and Vermont. These are states that have already ratified their constitution to make sure that that we can change the slavery loophole in the Constitution. So what is happening right now is we can have forced labor legally for punishment for a crime. Right now, we have to get this through Congress. We need 2/3 of a vote in both chambers. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. But the more we tell the story, the more we educate people, the more, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, which part of the country you're from, the more people are coming on board to say that we need to end the exception once and for all for slavery.
Congresswoman, you were elected to fill the Georgia seat left by the late Congressman and civil rights icon, John Lewis. Can you talk to us about how you try to keep the legacy of good trouble alive?
So Congressman Lewis taught us that we have an obligation, a moral obligation to find a way to get in the way. And each day when I step into the halls of the U.S. Congress, when I walk through a Capitol that was built by enslaved people, I know that I have a legacy to uphold. I know that the people of Georgia's 5th District, we call ourselves the Fighting Fifth down here in Georgia. We have work to do to make sure that everyone has not only free and fair access to the ballot, but equality and justice for everyone in this country. And I have this constant reminder. I was able to know Congressman Lewis personally. My husband worked for him for many years. And so I have the blueprint, and it's up to me to continue to do the work. Each generation has to pick up the baton and take us one step closer to full equality for everyone in this country. Congressman Lewis paved the way, and it's my turn to do my part of the job.
And you clearly are energized to do that. Our thanks to you, Congresswoman Williams.
Thank you.
And still ahead here tonight. Coming up, actress Trace Lizette talks about portraying complicated family dynamics and making history with her new film, Monica. But next, 4 temples will be open to tourists looking for a peek at history, the world-changing event that may have happened here. We'll talk about it.
Whenever news breaks.
The crush of families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
In Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is. We're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
Reporting from Manhattan, I'm Diane Macedo. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
And welcome back. We're tracking several headlines from around the world tonight. The death toll continues to climb in India amid a scorching heat wave. At least 166 people have died from heat-related illnesses over the past several days in the northern part of the country, with temperatures hitting 109 degrees. Hospitals completely full, and disruptions to the power supply complicating the emergency response. Officials in North Korea vowing to push for a second attempt to launch a spy satellite after their rocket crashed after liftoff last month in a humiliating setback for leader Kim Jong-un. Kim attended a 3-day ruling party meeting where leaders addressed the failure. And tourists in Rome will now have the chance to visit the site where archaeologists believe that Julius Caesar was assassinated. The 4 temples, dating back as far as 3rd century BC, could previously only be seen from a street-level perimeter. But luxury jeweler Bulgari helped fund the project, which is being called one of the best preserved remains of the Roman Republic. As we continue celebrating Pride Month, we're looking at the film Monica, which had a groundbreaking debut at the Venice Film Festival. The movie focuses on a woman who goes back home to care for her ailing mother after years of estrangement, reuniting with her family after being alienated by them. Monica packs an emotional and heart-wrenching punch. Take a look.
I'm just so happy that you're here. You ready? This is Monica. Hi.
Hey. Joining me now is the lead actress of the film, Trace Lizette. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Look, it seems like the relationships are strained among almost everyone in this family in this movie after your character's arrival. Why is it so important for Monica to face her family in that particular moment?
Well, I think it's just her going back to explore whatever's left of their time together. They've been away for so long, and she's just a fully formed, well-lived-in woman. And, you know, her mom doesn't recognize her as she's dealing with brain cancer and whatnot. And so I think for Monica, it is just a burying of the hatchet in order to kind of honor whatever time is left
with their families, especially as we have aging parents, right? And we know a little bit about Monica, but she still seems to be a bit of a mystery. I mean, not just to viewers, but to her family as well. So is that an intentional choice there?
Yeah, I think that she's guarded. I think anyone who lives this life, this trans life, has been through a lot. I know I have. And, you know, she's also at the same time protecting herself. She is, she's showing an extreme amount of care and empathy by even making that journey in the first place. And so I think at the same time she has to hold on to some of those walls that she's built up to just, you know, survive over the years. And at the same time, it's the priority is not really her in this moment. It's more about exploring these last days with her biological mom.
Right, and a lot of people, you know, don't experience firsthand how not accepting one's gender identity and sexuality can then affect familial bonds. So how do you work to portray the complexities of someone in that situation?
Well, I think that every family is different, and this family is still just trying to figure out where Monica stands with them, and Monica's doing the same thing. I think that there's also this other kind of purpose that Monica finds towards the end of the film with her nephew. I won't spoil it, but the way in which we deal with gender identity and sexuality and femininity and masculinity with our family members is something that is deeply tied to how we're all programmed to think. And I think that this film is provocative. It's meant to be provocative. Art should be provocative. It should make you think. It should let you walk away with questions and concerns, and hopefully more empathy.
Right, and spur conversations for sure. And you made history at the Venice Film Festival as the first transgender actor to lead a film that debuted there. What does that mean to you, and what does your impact mean to the future of the film industry?
It meant a lot to me. I mean, it was also, it left me with a lot of question marks about what all that means, what that seal of approval means, and also why did it take that long for one of us to get through and be able to lead a film at the oldest film festival in the world. Personally, it felt very validating, but also scary because I still wonder what's next for me in my career, and when will we be seen as equal? When will we get the same opportunities? And I think that day is yet to come.
And as you worry about what's next for your career, you have a lot of fans out there that are hoping to see more of you. What projects can we look forward to seeing you in?
Well, right now we're striking, so I don't have much to report back on that front. But I'm keeping the hope alive, and hopefully we can find common ground and a deal that's fair for everybody.
Absolutely. Trace Lizette, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, and her film Monica is out in limited theaters now and is available to watch on Apple TV+. And still to come, a Father's Day to remember. Oh, how a young son gave his dad the gift of spending more years together. We have that story next. When I got sent to Idaho to cover the murders of 4 college students, it was a story that didn't make any sense. 4 students stabbed to death in their beds while 2 roommates were home.
You gotta think to yourself, okay, who's the target and how many people would a man go through to get to his target?
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is The King Road Killings, a new podcast from ABC Audio. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television. From America's #1 news comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and customizable to your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
What's good to watch, read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? Oh, it's all right here. GMA Life. Get the latest celebrity buzz, deals and steals, and the coolest lifestyle tips from GMA.
I love that so much.
Streaming weekends on ABC News Live.
And finally tonight, the ultimate Father's Day gift is the gift of life that one son was actually able to give to his father. This Bay Area man donated part of his liver to his ailing dad, allowing him to potentially live decades longer. Reporter Suzanne Fawn from our partner station, KABC, has their special story in our local lowdown.
Like, literally, there's a part of me in him just as there's a part of him in me.
31-year-old Abel Pineda gave his dad Manuel a life-changing gift.
I donated the right lobe to my father, and this is what remained in me. How lucky are we that the liver is something that completely regenerates?
Abel, who happens to be the mayor of San Pablo, shared his incredible story on TikTok. Back in 2021, doctors discovered that Manuel was ill and needed a new liver.
Manuel had liver disease, for what we call fatty liver disease, so that he had a condition where the liver built up too much fat, and then he developed cirrhosis from that. And that's why he needed the liver transplant.
Manuel was put on a transplant list, but it was going to be a very long wait.
I learned about being a living donor, and part of being a living donor is that you get to expedite the process for someone to receive a transplant.
But for that to happen, Abel learned he had to lose weight.
There I started eating better. I started, exercising a lot more regularly.
In 3 months, Abel lost more than 50 pounds. And to get ready to receive an organ, Abel's father...
Manuel had lost about 50 pounds after his stomach stapling surgery.
UCSF doctors say it took a lot of work, but an organ transplant was possible.
Well, at UCSF, we do about 150 liver transplants every year, and about 25 of those 150 are from living donors.
Manuel's surgery was a success. He's grateful for the team of surgeons at UCSF. He's also grateful for his son.
I appreciate the donation for continue for my life.
Abel says it's the best gift he could have ever given his father.
I feel fortunate and blessed to be in a position where I can give back and give life to someone who gave me life.
We asked Manuel how he feels.
Yo me siento muy satisfecho y contento porque Dios nos regala otro día más de vida.
He said, I feel just very happy, that God gave me another day of life, and I'm just grateful to be here.
Beautiful story, and our thanks to Suzanne Pham for that. And that's our show for tonight. I'm Kana Whitworth. ABC News Live is here for you all night with the latest news, context, and analysis. And you can always find us on Hulu, Roku, the ABC News app, and of course on abcnews.com.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.